I'm going to do warm-cool studies of these two paintings, so I just wanted to demonstrate painting darker skin tones and lighter skin tones with the same palette. If you would like a free mixing guide, it's a PDF that has certain recipes for a few of the key mixtures so that you can get a basic warm-cool palette, and then you can always mix in between to get closer to something that I have here. That free mixing guide is on my website, so if you go there you can download it if you sign up. There is a link in the description. So this is called Zamorka by Anton Asby, and this is Lady Agnew by Sargent, John Singer Sargent. They were both done in the late 1800s, about the same time. They're in interestingly, very similar poses. Their torsos are turned slightly to the left and their heads are pretty much just facing us straight on. Lady Agnew is looking directly at us, and the Zamorka portrait, she is looking off to the right, to our right. And the costume is somewhat similar. There's kind of this fluffy white stuff in both of the bodices. In Zamorka, she has darker jacket or sleeve. I'm going to just make a basic drawing. I'm gonna not be too picky about detail. The proportions just have to be generally correct. They don't have to be absolutely perfect, but we do want to have kind of general container that is approximately the same, proportion of light and dark. My brush strokes are going to be a little more blobby than really fine detail. Okay, so thinking about the shadow and light, there's a little triangle of light here on her cheek, similar to this one. Not exactly the same light position, but very similar. And I want to treat the head in a very abstract way, so I want to make sure that I'm not getting caught up in little details of the face. I just want to think generally the light is coming from the upper left. Right? So the shadows are going to tend to collect on the lower right. So if we think of the head as an oval, we're going to see that the shadows kind of come up like this. There's a little triangle of light here. And there's a cast shadow that the head is casting onto the neck there, similar to the portrait of Lady Agnew. So we have the shadow coming up. The shadow is lighter, but it's still a shadow. So light, the form is turning away from the light. Okay, so the light is a little bit different. Hers kind of has a little bit more light across the shadow side. So these are just, marks for me to know where I want to put, where I want to start with the shadow. And again, there's a shadow being cast on the neck from the head. So not perfect drawings, but they'll do. So the first thing I want to start with is the hair in both portraits, and the hair is very dark in both. I have underneath these references my heat map references. So this is again a color-coded value map. I would say I'm probably going to go value 1. If we look at the heat maps, they're on average dark green, and then dark green is sort of the average median in the Lady Agnew as well. So that's the value 1. And instead of going for just the pure black with just a speck of white, I'm probably going to shift it just a little bit more to a warmer neutral. So I'll probably go for maybe chroma 1. So I'm just going to kind of fill this in. And I'm not trying to paint all the details in the contour or anything. I'm just trying to get the basic shape. And same thing with this. I'm just going to average it to this value 1, even though in both of the hair, the mass of hair does have some lighter and darker areas. It's not just completely flat. But I'm erring on the side of simplicity with this, and I can usually go in and brush in something a little bit lighter and something a little bit darker if I need to later on in order to give it a feeling of... What I'm really going for with these studies is the feeling of light on the form. So the feeling of the light on the pose and in the space around. Average chroma for skin will be about 3 to 4 for the non-ruddy areas. And her shadow averages about a value 2. There's some darker accents in there and probably some lighter reflected light. Maybe some areas that have a little less chroma, some a little more. But right now I'm just going to take this value 2, chroma 3, and put just a very simplified version of that shadow in. So I'm kind of averaging these tones that I'm seeing. And again, I'm not painting the eye, I'm just treating it as if it were a very like rudimentary clay figure, just no detail, just very, there's maybe like a hint of an eye socket, maybe a little bump for where the nose is, and then you've got that light on the cheek, so I'm leaving a space for that. So this is just all the value 2, chroma 3. So I'm making a little bit of a transition into the hair with this value 2, but I'm not worried too much about, you know, blending into it. I want to leave the strokes actually more so separate than blended, because it allows me to be specific about the color that I'm putting down and not just mush everything together and be kind of vague about it. I want to know exactly what I'm putting where. Now there is some value 2 in the shadow on her temple for Lady Agnew. So value 2, chroma 3, just right there. There's also probably some darker stuff happening in her eye area. Okay, so that was a little accents of shadow for Lady Agnew that were close to value 2. And then most of the average on Zamorka that were close to value 2. So now let's go up to value 3. So I'm trying to go up in value for each portrait step by step, but I'm ignoring the background and clothing for now. Okay, so we have value 3 is the purple. So if we look at, that's kind of coming out of the shadow, and on her neck, a lot of her neck. Maybe I'll just average that whole thing as chroma 4. So value 3, chroma 4. So I'm going to jump up here. So chroma 4, value 3. So it's a little higher in chroma and lighter in value than what I was working with before, right? So we've basically stepped up from value 1, chroma 1, value 2, chroma 3, and then value 3, chroma 4. So we're kind of going up this diagonal right now. I'm going to put this little triangle of light on her cheek. Okay, so value 2, I'm going to go back in again to just the chroma 3 and put in, so I'm wiping this back off my brush, going back to value 3, chroma 4. Now going back to Lady Agnew, like I said, she doesn't have much in the way of value 3, just maybe a little bit right here. I'm going to go jump now to value 4, value 4, chroma 3. So now I've kind of stepped back a little bit in chroma as I go up in value, just for this particular area here. And the side of the nose as well. So the side of the nose is a little higher in chroma, so I'm just going to jump up to chroma 4. I'm going to stick with chroma 4 just on average for now. So maybe put that in there. Well, maybe I'll just go back to chroma 3. I don't want to make it too gray. So chroma 3. just gonna kind of transition there a little bit and go up in chroma a little bit. I could probably put in just like an indication for the mouth, like the shadow side of the lips, like that. Okay, so back up to Zamorka. I would say I'll maybe stay with around chroma 4 for this. So value 4, chroma 4, the lower part of the face, maybe I'll have that be chroma 4. So keep going with chroma 4 on the neck. So now jumping down to chroma 3, so chroma 3, value 4. It's a little bit less chromatic, at least what I'm perceiving in most of this area. Even though the lips tend to be redder, in this case, with the darker skin, they are showing less chromatic in this area. I'm just leaving a little spot for light to put a value 5 there. There's a lot that happens in the range right in here. Very subtle shifts away from the base, kind of average skin tone towards less chroma, towards more chroma. Very subtle shifts. Go back to chroma 4. So the next value is going to be value 5. So for a medium tone skin, the local color might be value 5. But in this particular situation, she has a lot of light bouncing into her shadow, and her skin is very fair. It is a light shadow color. Like generally shadows will be like 5 is usually the lightest you'll get. In her case, she has some value 6 reflected light. So value 5 is both a little bit of darker area of light and also some lighter area of shadow. So in this case, you know, a lot of times artists will say, oh, well, you can't have areas that are in the shadow be lighter than any area that's in the light. But that's just not true. Sometimes the reflected light can be lighter than areas that are still in the light but turning almost to the shadow because it's a gradation. So which areas are value 5 on Zamorka? Go value 5, chroma 4. And then around the mouth, it's going to be lower in chroma. So maybe stick to chroma 3. So let's see, value 5, chroma 3. For that little bit of light on the lip and then kind of around the... So I'm going to jump back up to chroma 4. Value 5, chroma 4. Just transitioning out there. And maybe I'll stick with chroma 3 here on the forehead. Like if we look, it feels lower in chroma there. Value 5, and I'll go up to 6 this time. Could even be higher, but for now I'll just do 6. I'm going to go up to value 6. Chroma 3. Value 6, chroma 3. Right there. And let's see if value 6 chroma 3 feels low enough in chroma for an average for that highlight. It actually feels like it's too chromatic for me, so I might drop down a little bit more into chroma 2 because it's reflecting the light source, and so it's picking up less of the color of the skin. So now we're going to jump up to value 7. So kind of put that in. The light on the cheek is going to be a little higher in chroma, so it's going to be chroma 4. And then for Zamorka, it's that highlight on her cheekbone, right? We're pretty much done with the skin on Zamorka as far as the averages go. So I'm going to go back down to Lady Agnew. So we have a large area of value 8 on the light side of the face. Value 8, chroma 3. So we're leaving a little bit of highlight on her cheekbone. So let me jump up in chroma to chroma 4, and that's about as high in chroma as we can get and still be at value 8. So up that chroma a little bit. Hopefully you can see that. Value 9, I'm just going to use the chroma 2 because that's all I have. Now, generally when it does get up to that highlight, it's going to lower in chroma anyway. So I can see the gray through some of these brush strokes, so I'm just trying to paint it a little more opaquely. So now in order to get a little bit more dynamic range in Zamorka, I'm going to go back in and put in some of these darker accents in her shadow. Okay, so we're going to go to value 1, and I'm going to go to this slightly higher chroma, value 1, that I had mixed up. And then just put in some darker accents, just brush them right into the paint there. So try not to draw too much, try not to blend too much, just putting in patches of paint basically as much as I can. The ear is going to be pretty high chroma, maybe about value 5 at the top, and then a little lower in chroma and lighter in value as it moves down. Unfortunately, because I'm painting over, there's black there to begin with, it's a little darker and less chromatic than I wanted. Okay, there we go. Value 8. Then over on the shadow side, her ear is maybe more like value 3. Kind of put it in like that. Now I'm going to work with the background and the clothing. So for the background of Lady Agnew, we're obviously going to be pushing it as blue as we can. So I'm just going to use this straight gray string for most of it. When I have something like a pattern or a background where when I'm doing these simplified studies, it's kind of a play between averaging the colors together and just kind of like as if you were just mixing them both together and then sampling them. So sometimes I'll do like a little bit of both, and it's just kind of just have to play around and see what looks best. Sometimes it depends on the scale of your study, what size brush strokes you're using. And I'm doing the gray because I feel like her dress is a little bit of a lavender. At least that's how I see it in most reproductions. But it's kind of a cool enough color, has enough blue content in it that I think this blue-gray looks pretty well. So value 9 on the blouses. Lady Agnew's is going to be the gray. So I'm going to put a little accent there. You can kind of see where the value 9 is approximately. Going to move up a little bit in to chroma 1 of the warm to put in the lightest accents on the blouse for Zamorka. And then what I want to do is just kind of go back through and see if there's any places where I could adjust something to make it a little less distracting or a little more kind of on target for the color. I don't want to spend too much time fussing with the drawing. Let me just dip into that value 3 gray and then down to the value 2. Just kind of break up that hair a little bit. Maybe I'll just kind of make a little extra extension for that. So not exact, but analogous, trying to keep things very simplified and just focusing on the light and the color for the most part, and trying to get a sense of how I could interpret the original references into the warm cool palette.